So, earlier this week I suggested that you push that follow button because I sensed that announcements post D23 would be fairly fluid. The follow button pushes these episodes into your podcast feed very quickly, and that is what has happened and continues to happen. So before we jump into our main topic today, there's already a quick update to yesterday's episode about the future of the Magic Kingdom. Between the time I made that episode and now, a permit from Disney has shown up with the South Florida Water Management District. It was initially filed the day after the D23 event ended, and I'm guessing that it took a couple of days for it to be processed and posted as under review. The permit is for work to manage storm runoff in the Frontierland section of the Magic Kingdom, which needs to be in place before the river can be closed. In terms of some super exciting permit language, here's how the project was described in the documents. It is a modification or alteration of existing works, activities, and/or stormwater management system, which includes, and again here I will quote, the construction of a regional stormwater management treatment facility. But this is the first step in creating a new project of size and scale on land that was once a swamp. We're still a long ways from anything interesting happening in the Magic Kingdom. I wouldn't expect the rivers or the island to close for a while. But Disney, as they promised, are moving quickly. I do think some of the quickness here is related to how little the stock price has moved after these plans were announced. It's still below $90 per share. Simply, I believe that there is a concerted and conscious effort here to show investors, specifically institutional investors, that Disney is serious about large additions to the Florida parks in an effort to move the needle on the company's valuation. And also, the move forward with this early construction means that probably fairly soon, it will be a little too late to go back on the Cars area and Villains Lands projects. These look to be moving forward fairly quickly. But today we aren't focused on that. We talked about all that yesterday. Today we're focused on what's coming to Hollywood Studios, along with some of the controversies surrounding that. So, if you're ready, here we go. Let's start with the straightforward announcement for Hollywood Studios, and then we'll get to the tricky stuff. In 2026, Disney and Lucasfilm will release The Mandalorian and Grogu to theaters, a full-length feature continuing their story. It just started filming a couple of weeks ago, and along with that, Disney will add Mando and his little charge to the Smuggler's Run ride at both Disneyland and Hollywood Studios. The Millennium Falcon there works off of a game engine, so the vehicle's movement, gameplay, and visuals can be swapped out somewhat easily, more or less like they are over at Star Tours, to create a new experience for that ride. Here's how Dave Filoni put it. Just imagine it. You'll be able to fly alongside Mando and Grogu on thrilling and dangerous missions. And it's that last word I want to focus on for a moment, missions, plural. It could be that there are 2 missions in one adventure, but it could be that they're developing material for more than one ride experience. Regardless, this will come to the parks at about the same time that the Mandalorian film is released to theaters in 2026. But now here's the other piece of news and all of its controversy. Disney announced a Monsters Incorporated coaster ride for Hollywood Studios. This has been an on-again, off-again project for roughly 2 decades. The coaster will be a fast trip through the door warehouse area next to the scare floor. It will be a family hanging coaster. The coaster building will be in its own mini land that looks like Monstropolis. So here's the mystery. Disney released just 2 pieces of exterior concept art for the attraction and its surrounding area. Both have the Monsters Incorporated building with a small park and a roadway out front, but the locations don't match. In one piece of concept art, the one with Sully out front and center, the surrounding buildings are brick, and most tellingly, the roads are brick as well. This is the design pattern and palette of the Grand Avenue and Muppet Courtyard section of Hollywood Studios. There's also the Muppet Courtyard water tower vaguely in the background, so that pins that surely to this area. In the other piece of concept art, the area, without any brick roadways, seems to be sized to take over the animation courtyard, with the blurred area on the left where there are some trees to block out what's there is hiding the voyage of the Little Mermaid Theater, which likely is staying and doesn't fit well into this image. This is a different area than the first piece of concept art. It does really look sized to fit the animation courtyard, but also I should say that there are no specific markers like that water tower that definitely define this as the courtyard area. So what does all this mean? Well, I have some theories. First, as no location was announced even after the D23 event, maybe there's simply no firm location yet. And in this, designers are experimenting as to where this will actually go. Or maybe after the Rivers of America closure, Disney is simply limiting the bad news for this week, but I really don't think that's it at all. Second, the Monsters door coaster is a very old idea. Again, as I mentioned, about 20 years old. The concept has been picked up and put down many times. And maybe one of these two pieces of concept art is from an earlier incarnation of this project, and I do think that's likely. I also had this thought when I was looking at the very detailed model of the ride building and the track course. When you have a track course laid out like this with every turn accounted for, you usually have a firm location for it, along with other things such as an area model, some overview art, and so on. And I thought that maybe the model on display for the ride building was simply a model that, at least in part, was made for an earlier version of this mini-land, with that ride track layout now being incorporated into a newer version of the area. There was once a version of this coaster ride that was considered for roughly where Toy Story Mania now stands. The model at D23 was a 3D printed model, and I'm wondering if some of the previous elements were simply ported over to this new presentation. But to be perfectly honest, I don't know where this land is going to go. I'm not sure Disney does either yet. If you go back a few episodes to the one called Why D23 Matters This Year, I laid out an argument that Disney was under pressure from investors to have a large presentation for the American parks to not only maintain market share from Universal, but also to undo the 6% revenue dip that happened at the American Disney parks this past quarter. And I'm wondering if this situation led to Disney pulling out some older art and models mixed with new art to give the impression that the planning process for the Monsters Incorporated area was a little further along than it actually is. And just to repeat this, I don't know where it's going to go, but I think that there are likely two possibilities. Let me explore both of them. If there's a Monsters Incorporated mini-land in the 5 or 6 acres presently occupied by the mostly defunct and poorly aging Animation Courtyard, then it wouldn't be hard to shift this whole side of Hollywood Studios into a Pixar-themed section of the park. At the top would be Pixar Plaza, and then Toy Story Land, then Monsters Incorporated, and at the bottom would be Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy. The problem with this lineup right now is that Rock and Roller Coaster is in the middle of all that. But Rock and Roller Coaster is due for a big retheme. Most kids don't know who Aerosmith is anymore, and as of last month, due to Steve Tyler's voice issues, they've stopped touring for good. Regardless of the placement of Monsters Incorporated, this attraction is really due for a retheme. So pick your favorite Pixar film with a race or chase scene, maybe something with Buzz Lightyear, maybe a chase with all of the Toy Story characters, possibly Cars, but that's coming to the Magic Kingdom, possibly Inside Out, and over in California, don't forget, Disney has already rethemed a coaster to The Incredibles, so that's a possibility here too. But many announcements I've noticed, especially for the Magic Kingdom so far, show a reimagining of large sections of the park with a multi-year plan. So possibly a multi-year plan is under discussion here to unify the right side of Hollywood studios. As for the other possible location, it's the Muppets Courtyard. The front half of the courtyard looks great right now, but post-COVID, the back half is desolate with some stores that haven't been opened in years. I believe the old Christmas store is partially being used for storage. So this suggests that there's a needed revamp to this area as well. If the decision to build Monsters Incorporated is over in the Grand Avenue section and the current Muppet Courtyard, meaning that Muppet Vision 3D will likely need to be shut down, perhaps the closure of Muppet Vision could be announced at the same time as the announcement that the Muppets are moving to another area of the resort, as there's been endless rumors for years of various Muppet attractions at Disney World, particularly over at the Magic Kingdom. And again, this is nothing but bare speculation, but the announcement of a new Muppet attraction to be built as the current one closes would play a whole lot better for Muppet fans than simply announcing that Muppets are leaving and Monsters are in. And if this is the actual plan, and let's say it's been the plan for a while, I'm now wondering why Disney added in new digital effects to Muppet Vision earlier this year. Sure, some of those were relatively inexpensive digital art and some new projection equipment, but those two things don't line up for me unless one division at Disney wasn't talking clearly to another, which I also see as a possibility. Again, of these two options, and maybe there are more possibilities beyond this, but we only had 2 pieces of concept art, I think placing Monsters so that it lines up with the other Pixar properties would, for me, be the better of the 2 choices. Putting Monsters Incorporated into the animation courtyard so that it lines up with the other Pixar properties, I think might be the better of the 2 choices. Putting Monsters Incorporated there also expands the park's overall ride capacity. Instead of swapping out one theater attraction with a modest hourly throughput for a coaster with about the same hourly throughput, you get a new ride to increase the overall attraction throughput per hour inside the park. And from a thematic perspective, the other side of the park presently is an absolute mess. From Indy to Star Tours to Grand Avenue to Muppet Vision to Galaxy's Edge, nothing really lines up well at all. Adding Monsters Incorporated over there simply adds to the thematic confusion. But I can also see the firmest piece of artwork that we presently have is definitely tied to the Muppet Courtyard area, so maybe that's what's actually being considered for this. But to get back to my main point, we don't know where Monsters will be built, and the artwork that has been released clearly shows 2 very different locations. And maybe this suggests that the discussion inside of Disney is still going on. Again, here's my take. With concerns about investor confidence, I think that there's a strong possibility that Walt Disney Imagineering was under pressure to announce more than it had been fully planned to offer, both to fans in the audience that night, but more importantly, to institutional investors in their offices on Monday morning. Plans to show that Disney could not only keep market share, but perhaps increase it over time. Again, this is a guess, but this may have led to a situation where announcements were made without significant elements being pinned down. So take that all with a grain of salt. But I do suspect that that's what's happening right now. There will likely be an announcement about the location for this attraction in the not-too-distant future. If there had been a firm location, I think the plan would have been to release all the bad news at once this past Monday, that the river, the island, and maybe other things such as Muppet Vision were going away, and then to move through that theme park news cycle just once. But instead we find ourselves here where there's the possibility of multiple waves of bad news, where Disney needs to announce that more things are going away. So to close up today, a few more things that I think qualify as good news. First, the sign logo for Harryhausen's, that is, the restaurant with the crossed chopsticks with the eye, appears in both concept drawings. So once this is all built, we will probably have a themed sushi restaurant no matter where this mini-land goes. A restaurant that was featured both in the first Monsters Incorporated movie and in the Monsters at Work TV series. Second, the likely height requirement for this coaster, based on other Disney rides and other family hanging coasters, is going to be somewhere between 40 and 44 inches, which means for kids who are probably at least 5 years old, give or take. Younger kids will no doubt be interested in the Monsters Incorporated films and TV shows, so I would lay money here that there will also be a second, smaller attraction in this land that would appeal and would be appropriate to younger visitors, though of course there's been no discussion of that yet at all, which suggests that maybe in the months or years ahead there might be a little more to announce with this area, as I think it would be hard to have a kid-focused Monsters Incorporated land without a kid-friendly attraction. Lastly, at least in one piece of exterior concept art, there's clearly a play area with a Monsters Incorporated slide. So as 2 longtime play areas at the resort close, that is, Tom Sawyer Island and the Boneyard, maybe another is being designed now and will open sometime soon. And with that, we are ready to move on to our next park later this week. I'll be back later this week with another episode, this time exploring what was announced for Epcot and elsewhere at the Florida Resort. Again, I'm trying to do a couple of things here. I don't want to simply list off what was announced. I want to take us down a far more detailed and nuanced path. But I also want to get these discussions out there as quickly as I can. So I'm simply going to post podcast episodes and videos as I finish them this week and next. The material in these episodes are proposals and plans that I'm sure we will refer to and update for many years moving forward. Also, I realize I still have a couple of accompanying videos to edit and post, so that's probably tomorrow's job. Again, this has been the largest Disney news dump that I've seen in many years, and I'm trying to move through it all as quickly and as completely as I can. Lastly, as you know, we're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast. We do just 2 things: deep dives on stories related to the history of the Disney studio and the parks, and news and analysis of current events as they relate to the Disney company. We are funded entirely by listener contributions, specifically by listeners who join us on Bandcamp as monthly subscribers. On Bandcamp, you will find over 200 episodes not available on iTunes or anywhere else. But the best reason to join us there is to support the work we do here and to make sure that this podcast continues to exist. You can support us by becoming a monthly subscriber at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link down in the show notes. So, until sometime later this week, this is Todd James Pierce.